Hello, everyone. Welcome to another video of History Via Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. M. David Litwa, and today we're going to be discussing his course for Myth Vision Podcast, The Ancient Greek Mysteries and Christianity. The link to purchase his course will be in the description below. And with that being said, welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Litwa.
Thanks, Jacob. I appreciate the
Mm,
opportunity, and thanks for helping me get the word out.
Of course. So, if you could elaborate, what is this course about? And yeah, it's obviously titled "The Ancient Greek Mysteries and Christianity." So, the following couple of questions I have is, what connections do you see between ancient Greek mysteries and Christianity? And would you look at Christianity as a mystery religion?
Well, this is one of several courses that I've created, and I'm looking for suppliers to bring out the other course materials. But I wanted to start with the mystery religions because this is something that is bandied about on YouTube, and there's a lot of things. There's a lot of daring things said, but actually not, unfortunately, not a lot of real in-depth knowledge about what we would mean by a mystery initiation or a mystery cult. Sometimes, probably a little bit wrongly called a mystery religion. And so I wanted to take people through a deep dive and to go through 6 or 7 different examples of what scholars today mean by mystery cults. And so we go through them one by one, as if I was doing a regular undergraduate lecture course. And we go through Attis, we go through Isis and Osiris, we go through Hermes and Hermetic thought, we go through um, several others. And then we culminate with Christianity and discuss similarities and differences. The overwhelming sense that I have on YouTube is that there's a stress on similarities. And there are some, but in any serious study of material, you also have to study differences. And you also have to study terms. What do we mean by mystery? What do we mean by cult? What do we mean by Christianity? And what do we mean by terms like syncretism and dying gods or suffering gods? And is Jesus one of them? And of course, the question that you raise, what's the influence? And it's important to keep in mind that since 80 to 90% of the evidence that we have for the ancient world has been destroyed, some of it by chance, some of it by intention, that it's quite difficult to talk about genetic dependence. This leads to that. That's sort of what you find in like a math book or something, that you can talk about, one thing causes this thing, in sort of modern physics. But when you're dealing with ancient history, you really can't talk too much about causation and influence. And what we need to talk about is what I like to call dynamic cultural interaction, and talk about that third thing, the third overarching thing, which is Greco-Roman culture and how one engaged, how one was religious in terms of that culture. Okay. And what sort of things one would be involved in, what sort of presuppositions one would have. The best analogy that I can give for the ancient Mediterranean world is it looked a lot more like Indian religion, that is the religion of modern India, than it did anything you'll find in Europe or America. That is, it was a whole world full of gods in which gods were worshipped in shrines, on the streets. And some of those gods had a public face with large public temples. And some of those very same gods sponsored more secret rites, which demanded an initiation ritual, sort of like a hazing ritual, where you went through something. You learned something, and then you went through something, and you experienced something, often with a group, whether small or large. And then that group went on and carried on the mystery and didn't tell it to anyone else. And this is a pattern of religion. It's not just about thought. When people talk about dying and rising gods, that's just about theology, as if there was, some overall theology in Greco-Roman religions. That's just not the case. I mean, there's no overall theology to anything in the ancient world. There's just competing discourses, which no one has the authority to control. There is no pope of Greco-Roman religion, like there is, a pope of Roman Catholicism today. There's no one who is controlling the discourse or trying to control it by, burning books or threatening people or what have you. Okay. So Christianity is in this environment, and it's competing, and it's presenting its own initiation rite. And that initiation rite is presented as a gateway into secret knowledge about God, secret knowledge about the universe, secret knowledge which saves you and brings you out of this world. And you can't be saved without this secret knowledge that you learn in the course of a sermon after a rite of initiation with people of like mind. And that structure of doing religion is something that had a precedent in Greco-Roman thought. And that structure, that precedent, was best exemplified in mystery cults, which many of them were religions, or I should say cults, which could move from city to city. They were translocal cults. They often involved small groups of people and teachers, some of whom carried sacred books and who could teach you an initiation rite, and then you could go teach others an initiation rite. These mystery cults never became dominant in the ancient world. The dominant cults were always the state cults, the imperial cults, the stuff that received the state funding. But they were there. And it turns out that imperial cults, there is evidence where there were also imperial mysteries, where the mystery god that you would celebrate and worship was the emperor. So there's a lot of mixing and matching. At any rate, go check out the course. Okay, for what you will pay for a college course, God knows what what they charge for a semester. Go get this course. I don't set the prices. Derek at MythVision does that, but I believe it's very reasonable priced. If I'm not mistaken, in the ballpark of $40 US dollars, and it can serve as a great introduction and also a way for you to go deeper and to get the right books and the right knowledge. There's a website attached to the course, and in that website you'll also get further information and matters for discussion. And then you can use that course, hopefully, to continue to learn with me, in which I reveal, sorry, the pun, more information on my Patreon.
Do you think that Christianity has retained some or a lot of the practices from the ancient Greek mystery religions?
No, I don't. I think that what is, um, I won't say retained, but what is overlap is the structure. And the structure is, when you go to an early Christian service of worship, you don't learn about Dionysus, and you don't learn about Apollo, and you don't learn about Zeus. You learn about Jesus. But the structure of the ceremony in which you undergo an initiation rite, and then that initiation rite gives you greater access to further teachings. That is a similar structure to what we would find, say, at Eleusis, where with the help of a mystagogue, you undergo an initiation rite, and this gives you greater access to the teachings, and then you go through a second initiation rite, and that gives you even greater access, and then you preserve the mystery enshrined in your heart. For Christianity, those initiation rites are first baptism, and then baptism gives you access. You undergo catechesis, which is initial teaching by your mystagogue, and then you go through baptism, and then you get access to the ritual meal, which is the Eucharist, and the Eucharist gives you access to even more revelations from, exegeted or culled from the scriptures. And that's how they thought of it, as a kind of ascent into further gnosis. Gnosis just meaning knowledge. And it's not just Christian Gnostics who are using that language. Gnosis is a very common word in ancient Christianity for knowledge and increasing knowledge. And you need knowledge for salvation. As much as Christians emphasized, or as much as Christians today emphasize, salvation is by faith. Faith is a form of knowledge. It has a cognitive content. And the more mysteries you know, the better prepared you'll be to live a good life and to live a good afterlife.
Some claim that there's a lot of similarities between the Roman cult of Mithras with early Christianity. Do you see evidence of this?
Well, I'd need to know something specific. I don't know what the claims are. Um, do you have something specific in mind, or
It's like
as to?
the claim that they both worshipped on their god on Sundays. They practice worship and ritual styles in a similar fashion. And I think not. I think they didn't. The claim, another claim is that they didn't allow women in their buildings or something like that.
Well, that would definitely be a difference. I mean, it seems that Christianity in the ancient world was somewhat similar to Christianity today. There's always more women in the pews, so um, that would not be a similarity with Mithraism, which did appeal to men and did appeal to often men on military excursions. The problem with Mithraism, and of course I recommend that everybody go study it, but the problem with Mithraism is not a shred of, almost, I should say, virtually not a shred of written evidence survives, right? So all we have are their buildings, which are referred to as caves. And in those buildings, there's a central icon of Mithras slaying the bull. And there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of this particular icon, which survive in museums all over the world today. And wherever you had a Mithras cave, whether that be in North Africa all the way up to Hadrian's Wall near Durham in the UK, they had very similar structures and architecture, and the icon of Mithras was always the same. So they must have had a theology to go with the religious practice, but we don't really have any clear idea of what that theology was, because all we have are the pictures. It's as if, all Christianity didn't survive, and all we have is like all we have is, second or third century icons and picture books of what the Christian message was. So in the case of Mithras, we have a picture of Mithras coming out of a stone. And so presumably there was some story about him being born out of a rock. But we don't know any of the details of that story. Presumably someone knew it, but we don't know it any longer. So when you're talking about, similarities in terms of intellectual content, Well, not really. And I don't think even, you know, these wild-eyed people who see similarities everywhere, and just say, you know, dying and rising of gods are everywhere, which is simply not true. It never was true. It never will be true. If you look at Mithras, he's a perfect case where he's not a dying and rising god, and he does not suffer, and there's not a shred of evidence of that. So that's a great case where we're dealing with difference, and we have to acknowledge difference. And if you're really serious about the study of mystery cults, you don't study them for an apologetic purpose. I don't get up in the morning and say, I'm motivated to destroy Christianity, so I'm going to find similarities with Christianity and the mystery cults. No, I mean, I'm really interested in the mystery cults, and I don't want to, put Mithraism into a Christian framework. I want to really understand what those Mithraists were saying and thinking. And to do that, that takes a lot of hard work. So I've got to go and I've got to look at all these archaeological sites, and I've got to look at all these books, and I've got to look at, ancient libraries and ancient texts and ancient descriptions. Tertullian is the one who gives us some very superficial similarities between Mithras and Christians. He says that both are crowned, both refuse to wear crowns, which is really not an issue today, and that both in terms of rituals, there are certain rituals that they do in certain ethical practices that they inculcate that are similar. But ultimately, Tertullian never gets into the subject of Mithraic theology for the simple reason that he doesn't know it.
Do you think that the early Christians were trying to make Jesus, as they were trying to rewrite the historical Jesus and mythologize him, do you think they were trying to make him better and make their style of worship better in the mystery religions?
Well, of course, but so are the mystery religions, right? It's not always the case that mystery religions come first and Christianity comes second. A lot of the mystery cult developments, when you look at the cult of Isis, they develop in the early 2nd century, right at the same time where Christianity is developing. And just like today, I mean, if you're Jewish, you boast about Moses and Abraham, and if you're Muslim, you boast about Muhammad, and if you are Buddhist, you sing the praises of Buddha, and you try to show that the wisdom of your own tradition is the best, or at least, one of the best. And when you compare other great sages and religious heroes, obviously you put the emphasis on your own as the best, right? So I think this is human nature, right? I mean, none of that should surprise any of us, that we all play games of one-upmanship. And that's your greatest signal that, when you're dealing with religion and religious studies, it's not really helpful to do it in an apologetic vein, where you're either trying to say, this God is really good or this God is really bad. You really want to, study it in a more, for lack of a better term, sober and serious way. So, but yes, absolutely. If I was an Isis worshiper, and Isis worshippers were definitely said that Isis was better than Jesus, and Jesus, worshippers of Jesus said that Jesus was better than Isis. Absolutely. And, the worshippers of Isis said that she created everything because she's Mother Wisdom, and the Christians, began saying that, well, Jesus, he wasn't just a guy from Nazareth. He also created everything, and he's the wisdom of God. So, yeah, absolutely. They're talking to each other and past each other.
Do you think that the early Christians were a major competition, not just with Greek gods in general, but in particular Hercules and Dionysus?
Well, those were very popular deities, as I think I've mentioned here or somewhere else. We today swear by saying Jesus, but in the ancient world you swear by saying Hercules. So I mean, he's on everybody's lips. And in terms of individual shrines, there's more shrines to Hercules in the ancient world and to gods like Asclepius than there are to any other deity. And the reason is because Hercules is worshipped as both a hero and as a god. And his experience of suffering is something that really resonates with people. And his redemption, being a son of God and then experiencing human life, which was a life full of suffering. Heracles killed his children when he was driven mad. He also killed his wife. And as an expiation, he went through 12 labors, traveled around the world without any rest. He went to a garden in which a snake was guarding the fruit of a tree. He rode on a golden goblet to the Red Island in Spain and brought home the cattle of the sun, or the cattle, sorry, of Geryon, the triple-bodied monster. He went even down to Hades. He went down to the Greek hell, and he brought, through all that wandering and suffering and darkness and confusion, he brought up not only himself, but the very hound of Hades. And so the stories that he had of the man who conquered death, against whom the gates of Hades did not stand, the man who experienced terrible and awful catastrophe, and who was able to triumph out of that, the man who killed monsters and liberated an entire world from tyrants. That's Heracles. That's why he's loved. That's why he's honored. He is the ultimate superhero and a god. Much more famous than Batman or Superman ever will be was Heracles in the ancient world. And the same with Dionysus. As a baby, he goes through tremendous suffering, ripped apart by titans, put in a stew, eaten while still half alive, reconstituted out of a single beating heart, and out of that becoming a god of redemption. Dionysus Lysius is the god who frees you because he's in the wine, and he is the wine. He liberates your mind, gives you peace. And by honoring Dionysus, you please his mother, who is queen of the underworld. And that is how you free yourself, not only from the sufferings of this life, but the sufferings which await you after death. Essentially, in the mysteries of Dionysus, you learn how to expiate your own ancient crime, since we are children of the Titans, who ripped Dionysus apart. We make it up to Dionysus's secret mother, Persephone. And it's Persephone who, in the underworld, leads us into the great and glorious shining groves of peace and of joy, and allows us to escape the mists and the darkness and the trampling, the swamps, and the horrible loneliness that awaits other people. So yes, these were very popular gods because they gave very concrete benefits, and those benefits extended past this life.
When Justin Martyr responds to the idea that Jesus in the New Testament is similar to other pagan deities, he claims that Satan anticipated the coming of Jesus and created all these different religions to make it look like they parallel Jesus, when in fact he was stealing from Jesus, anticipating the coming theology of Jesus. Was he saying this because you think in his time Christians were disturbed by those similarities and he felt compelled to concoct that idea, this idea that Satan created all these other religions in advance?
Well, of course he's disturbed. Yes, it's the apologist's last and desperate hope to explain why, first of all, Jesus came extremely late in human history, virtually in the, coming through the back door of human history when we think that the curtain is about to close anyway. He finally shows up, and he shows up in a world, not waiting desperately to be saved, but in a world which is full of gods and happy people worshiping those gods, feeling never a need for anything like another savior deity, especially one from the backwater of Galilee. And Justin himself grew up not far from Galilee in a place called Flavia Neapolis, modern Nablus, which is right in the heart of ancient Samaria. And he grew up in a Greco-Roman town, in a Greco-Roman place. He never encountered the Jewish scriptures until he was an adult. And if you go to the ruins of Nablus today, you'll see that they had an immense temple to Zeus on top of Mount Gerizim, that they had other proud temples and structures, probably a few mystery cults, probably a shrine to the emperor. And they lived their lives, and they were happy. And there's no indication that anybody in the Greco-Roman world was looking for Jesus or a Messiah. And even in the heart of Samaria, Justin wasn't himself looking for that. So he grows up in a world in which people are living their lives worshiping Dionysus and Isis and Hercules and Apollo. And those are the state-funded cults. They get money from the government. And that's how they work. As common as churches are today in the American South, temples were even more common. And there was no separation between church and state. The Roman Empire funded the state cults. So yeah, Justin lived in a world which, the Christians were a tiny cult group, barely noticed. And he has to explain historically why all this has unfolded the way it has. Because he gets his truth from another source. These new and newfangled gospels. And the ink is barely dry on those gospels. And then he has to explain why the story of Jesus looks similar to some aspects of the story of other gods, where you've got divine conceptions, occasionally virgin births, ascensions to heaven in the case of, Hercules. Justin, interestingly, thinks that, the story of Danae, who was made pregnant by the golden reign of Zeus, is a case of virgin birth. And yes, he's disturbed by that. And his theory, which sounds incredible today, I'm not sure how it sounded in his own time, was yes, from the Jewish prophets, demons who lived in the air got wind of Jesus' coming, and so funded the Greek and Roman imagination with stories that would look like the stories of Jesus, that would later be written in the Gospels. I mean, it is truly a theory built on stilts, we would say today. But what else are you going to say for a religion born just yesterday?
So in Paul's time, not long after the crucifixion of the historical Jesus, how was Christianity, like, what do you think caused the formation of Christianity around Jesus's movement to become so Hellenized as we go through Paul's going from Paul's letters to the Gospels?
Well, it's a great question, and I will reveal my thoughts on that question the next time I get on your show. I want to tell your viewers that I've made a deal with Jacob that based on the sales of the course that we're promoting today, I'll come back on Jacob's show. So if you want to see me back on Jacob's show and want more information on these kinds of questions, check out the course. Think seriously about purchasing it. It's a real college course, okay? And you can take it, you can go deep, all right? Take a deep dive with me. Show that support both to me and to Jacob, and then I'll come back on Jacob's show and maybe we'll even get in some super chats so that everybody can be part of the conversation. But unfortunately, at the moment, I've got to speed on. I'm making my international move to Boston here in the next 6 weeks. So I hope that I can catch all of you before all that chaos happens.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Dr. Litwa.
All right. Thank you. And take care to everybody.
Yep, take care. Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.